Dear students, today let us learn about the steps involved in the formation of urine. Formation of urine happens in two steps mainly, ultrafiltration and reabsorption. The process of ultrafiltration happens in the glomerulus of the nephron. In this diagram, you can see the glomerulus portion of the nephron. It is in this particular area that ultrafiltration happens. Now, this ultrafiltration is a filtration that happens under extraordinary force. Now, let us see what is the reason. The blood flows with high pressure inside the glomerulus than in the capillaries elsewhere because the efferent arteriole or the outgoing arteriole is narrower than the afferent arteriole. Once more, the blood flows with a high pressure inside the glomerulus than in the capillaries elsewhere because the efferent arteriole is narrower than the afferent arteriole, or the outgoing arteriole is narrower than the incoming arteriole, which we call as afferent arteriole, which causes a high hydrostatic pressure inside the glomerulus. This high hydrostatic pressure forces the liquid part of the blood is called as plasma, along with certain substances like glucose, amino acids, urea, to be drained into the cavity of the Bowman's capsule. So, as a result of this hydrostatic pressure inside the glomerulus, the liquid part of the blood, which we call as plasma, is drained along with certain substances like glucose, urea, amino acids, water, etc. into the cavity or the lumen of the Bowman's capsule. That step which happens under extraordinary force, or the filtration that happens under extraordinary force, we call as ultrafiltration. And after the ultrafiltration, the liquid that is drained into the tubule or the cavity of Bowman's capsule we call as glomerular filtrate. Since it occurs in the glomerulus, we call it as glomerular filtrate. Now, the glomerular filtrate that is actually composed of substances like glucose, amino acids, urea, water, etc. And the thicker part of the blood which is left behind after the ultrafiltration, that is drained through the efferent arteriole, and that thicker part of the blood that leaves the efferent arteriole contains the blood corpuscles, especially the RBC, WBC and certain other proteins. So, the blood leaving the glomerulus is relatively thicker because of the presence of the blood corpuscles RBC, WBC as well as certain proteins present in it. Now, we are moving on to the next process in the formation of urine. As the glomerular filtrate passes along with certain substances like glucose, urea, amino acids, water, etc., it reaches the next part of the tubule, which we call as the PCT. So, then next process that happens after ultrafiltration is reabsorption. So, reabsorption happens in different parts of the nephron, which we call as PCT, loop of Henle, and finally DCT. Now, let us see what are the substances being reabsorbed in these regions. When the glomerular filtrate reaches the PCT, there occurs the reabsorption of most of the water, glucose, sodium ions, chloride ions, etc. And when it reaches the loop of Henle, most of the water along with sodium ions will be absorbed again. Then the glomerular filtrate finally reaches the DCT, or the distal convoluted region, where the reabsorption of the remaining part of the chloride ions along with some amount of water takes place. So, we can see as the glomerular filtrate passes through the tubule, there occurs reabsorption of most of the water and useful substances like glucose, salts, etc. So, the reabsorption of water is mainly under the influence of a particular hormone which we call as ADH or vasopressin. ADH also known as antidiuretic hormone. This is a hormone which is helping in the reabsorption of water in the kidney tubule or in the nephron, and that is secreted by the posterior part of the pituitary gland. Now, after the reabsorption, there is a particular process that happens that we call as tubular secretion. This is happening in the DCT region itself, that is the distal convoluted tubule. So, tubular secretion refers to the secretion of certain substances like potassium ions, foreign chemicals including penicillin as well as certain other drugs into the forming urine. So that is the tubular walls in the DCT region are actually secreting this into the urine which is formed. And finally, the urine that is formed in the DCT region, it will be drained into the collecting duct. So the collecting duct receives the DCT region of different nephrons, and from the collecting duct it will be passing into the pelvis region. The urine flows into the pelvis region of the kidney. From the pelvis region it passes through the ureters and reaches the urinary bladder.